So do badders. Welcome to Bad Boy Running. Jody, unfortunately, is having issues with his kids and his internet in the Isle of Wight. Who would have thought the Isle of Wight doesn't have good internet connections? Go figure. But our next guest, you know many different ways because we've talked about him on the podcast in the past, and you know him through watching as a runner, and you know him as the founder of the running channel. We've spoken to Anna before about it, so if you haven't listened to Anna's episode, go and listen to that. But welcome to the podcast, founder of the running channel, the lovely Andy Baddeley. Whee! Actually, that normally sounds more impressive with two of us cheering. How you doing?
I'll take cheers. It's been a while since I got cheered for running and stuff, so I'll take this one. Yeah, no, thanks very much for having me. It's really nice to be able to join you.
Well, how is it actually started? Because I want to go all things running channel, but I mean, how is your running now as an crazy high level runner? Like, what's your joy from in running now?
Yeah, it's just from I didn't think I'd ever find joy from like chasing times or improvement again, because I guess I'd set a ceiling, right, that I'm never going to get back to that level. But actually, I had a year out when I retired in 2016, 17, that kind of time, where I just didn't run at all because I hated it. I just didn't want to do it anymore, and like I'd had to do it for 10, 15 years every day. It was my job. If I didn't do it, I didn't make any money, or I didn't have a chance of achieving all of the goals I wanted to achieve. So then I just stopped, and it was really liberating to not have to do it. But then I got the bug to want to just get out there and actually back through doing a park run or two, and with some friends and my coach's sons and like the young guys that he was coaching. He kind of was like, "Oh, just come along and do your first park run with these guys again." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this. This is fun." And then just doing a couple of times a week and thinking to myself, and because I was at such a low level then relatively, seeing an improvement every week. I didn't think that would kind of motivate me again, but it did, just seeing a small improvement. And then kind of the ridiculous competitor in me every now and again would be like, "Oh, you know what? I could have a comeback." And then I would do like some kind of intense interval session without the correct build up to it or whatever, and then like hurt myself again and remember why I'd retired in the first place, which is because my body wouldn't really like tolerate that level of running. So yeah, and now I'm running once or twice a week on average, probably. Sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. And dealing with various niggles and stuff that comes from chasing the kids around or kneeling down, changing nappies or whatever. And that then sort of means that I don't always feel the best when I'm running, but I sort of don't care anymore. It's quite nice to just be out there.
Well, once or twice, it's almost in no man's land where it's kind of if you're up to 3 or 4, you're suddenly going to see like vast improvements and actually get reasonably good. But once or twice, you're kind of in running, but you're not getting that frequency to really feel great about the speed or to. I mean, would you say that's fair or?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. Yeah, I would three to 4 would be my like. That's the holy grail for me. That's what I would like to do, and it just tends to be that. Weirdly, because I don't have to do it anymore, I actually find the motivation more difficult. Whereas before, I was like, "Well, this is my job. I'm going to do it." Whereas now, I'm just like, it's very easy for me to knock it on the head. And because I'm doing various kids drop-offs and pickups and stuff, and I know loads of people are doing that and they find a way around it. But I find that if I don't do it in the morning, then I'm very unlikely to do it in the evening. And so then that kind of ends up being the weekends, or it means that that's why the second or third or fourth run gets knocked on the head, because all of a sudden it's Saturday again. I'm like, oh, okay. So that then I wanted to and was really motivated to build up to run long with the to me long, like a 90-minute run on a Sunday with the kind of the club guys, the guys who were still running at a really high level, because that was fun for me. And that was my least favorite run when I was an athlete. I hated the long run. I loved like track workouts and stuff.
Yeah.
But then now that's the thing that I get motivated by, achieving a distance. So being able to run 13 miles or something on a Sunday is motivating and feels like a sense of achievement.
Because I'm not sure whether, because quite a lot of your running video titles are kind of ex-Olympian does ... and there's almost an implication of the level of athlete you are trying something. Like, does that? I wasn't sure whether that would create pressure on you or motivation on you to have to represent, or even just creating narratives would force you into more running. I mean, I know Anna, for example, when she came on, she was talking about how she's just had the first year was just an insane level of different races, different challenges, different runs. I mean, are you dragged into that as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, Anna was brilliant. She just throws herself into everything, which is, you know, why she's been great. I tend to, yeah, a lot of my running ends up being me getting rolled out by the team for like, oh, let's roll Andy out for another challenge to see how fast he can run this, or let's see if we can you know, beat him in a relay or whatever it might be. And then that ends up making up an embarrassing amount of my running. But then because I'm not doing enough running in between necessarily, I'll like take a few, you know, weeks to recover from this hard effort before I then go again. So no, the motivation is very much I want to get up to a good solid level of running 3 or 4 times a week so that I can do something like I really, and I'll say it here on a podcast, like I want to run a marathon. I've never run a marathon before, and
oh wow.
I mean, I've covered, you know, 18, 19 miles in training before when I was training seriously, but never actually tried to run a marathon. And then I'm like, well, but I don't want to run a like fast road marathon because the guys that are still running that I was training with have run like 2:10. So, and I'm obviously not going to be able to run that. And then I start to worry about time. So I'd like to do one where I feel a sense of accomplishment for finishing it. And that could be a road marathon, but I think I'd like to take time out of the equation a little bit and do a trail marathon or something.
Well, if you wanted to, Beaujolais Marathon in France in November. I don't know how many wine stops it's got, but it's got a lot. And we're currently looking at that. Yeah, we're looking at the moment. And you're worried about times. If you come last, in our mind, you win the event because you've had most time on the course with the wine. So if that is something that would motivate you a bit more, that's what we haven't signed up for yet, but we're very close to. So how about that?
I mean, November sounds terrifyingly close when I'm running once or twice a week to build up from those kind of short runs. Because actually, the training itself, I'd be quite excited to do. I just worry that like I retired because of knee surgeries and things like that, and just every time I try to pick things up a little bit, something else hurts, and I just need to put the time in the kind of the gym to condition. I need to do all of the stuff that ultimately on the channel I tell everyone else to do. Like I need to build up sensibly and do all of the extra work around running that I used to do religiously to keep myself in that kind of fighting shape.
Well, bear in mind, we always say to people, you need to be able to run kind of a 10K to a half marathon comfortably, and then we'll do it in 7 hours. So you're kind of jogging in between. But let's rewind it. Let's rewind it to let's talk the end of your career. Firstly, I mean, it's probably been a long time since you've kind of dissected those days. Kind of how, with hindsight now, kind of how do you look back on your career and what you achieved or what you didn't achieve, depending on your view?
Yeah, good. That's a deep question, isn't it? We could be here for a while. So that during your career, you don't get that much time to celebrate the wins, and you end up or I ended up. But I think this is fairly universal. Having spoken to lots of other people, you obsess about the things that you made mistakes, or that you regret, or that you didn't quite achieve, or the bad races. They stick in your memory a lot more than the amazing races. So it took me a while to, like I said, to fall back in love with the sport and actually to remember and celebrate all these amazing opportunities that I had, and like I won quite a lot of races. Like you don't get to win that many races in track and field. Like you lose quite a lot because there's only one person who gets to win every race. So I won my decent share of races. I just never got the medals at the championships that I really felt would have given me that sense of like I did what I set out to do. And some of that was circumstance, like picking up injuries at really bad timing. So before Beijing Olympics, like I was in the shape of so before the 2 Olympics, actually, Beijing and London that I ran in. Before Beijing, I got on the plane on crutches, having like done a really hard workout like a few days before flying out, and damaged my Achilles doing that work, so I couldn't actually walk flying out to China. But I'd won a lot of races. I won a Dream Mile. I'd hardly lost any races that season, and went out there thinking I can really do damage at the Olympics. I can get a medal. But then it took like literally I didn't run a step for more or less the whole 4-week period into the Olympics. Did a training session, which we kind of, my coach and I laugh about it now. We went down to the track in Macau, so in a holding camp before flying out into Beijing. And the other coaches are all like, well, what are you doing, Andy? And Andy, my coach is called Andy. What's the because this would have been like the time to do a real, 1K time trial or something to like really, really get you ready. And we were like, oh, I'm doing bends and straights. They're like, what? I'm like, well, I'm going to jog the bends and run the straights at like slower than race pace. And everyone's looking like we're crazy. And I'm like, well, it's the first time I've run in 3 weeks. So I've got to try something. I've got to put spikes on. I've got to like get rolling again a little bit. And that was not horrifically painful, and therefore was deemed a success. and then at the Olympics in Beijing, I couldn't warm up properly or cool down properly after the events. I could just about get to the start line and race. And then I couldn't recover in between the rounds. We had a day off between each round because I couldn't go for my like shakeout runs or do strides or do anything. I just had to rest up and get physio treatment. So actually, I'm disappointed because I came 8th in the final ultimately.
I mean, that's pretty good to make the final, really. I mean, if you
and I ran probably the best race in my career in the semi-final. Like ultimately looking back, that start list for the semi-final, because it's the luck of the draw. The heats are seeded, but then depending on how people run in those heats, that then ends up being the draw for the semi-final. And actually, the semi-final I was in could have been the final. And so a lot of people got knocked out in that semi-final that you would have assumed would be finalists. And so I ran, I think, the best race I've ever run in the semi-final. And because of the lack of training I'd had that 4 weeks previous, by the time I got to the final 2 days later, it was one race too far for me. But that was an example of bad luck. And then some other championships, I didn't get the medals because I just made bad decisions, or like you get a split second to make the right decision, or you need to get a little bit of luck when you're out there. And so like that's just the nature of sport, isn't it? Sometimes you make good decisions and bad decisions. And actually, throughout my career, I raced the best when I wasn't thinking about it too much. I definitely was guilty of overthinking things, and loads of my races were like 10 o'clock at night. So you wake up at 7 or 8 in the morning, and you've got a lot of time to kill, and a lot of time to think about all of the mistakes that you could make. And it's interesting talking to people about marathons and ultras where they're worrying about finishing, and that's their concern potentially about like going at a certain pace and finishing. 1500 is totally different. You're not worried. I was never worried about not finishing, but you're just thinking about that. Like to me anyway, I was in physical pain the whole way. Like it's you're on your red line from like 400 or 500 meters in. And so it's a different kind of mental preparation to be like, I'm going to have to hurt myself tonight. If I want to win, I'm going to have to go so deep, I'm going to hurt myself. And that takes a certain kind of mindset. And when I just trusted my racing instincts and didn't worry about times, and just got onto the start line, heard the gun, and I was away, then that was when I ran the best, because I was trusting the fact that I'd done good training and I actually had a decent racing brain when I wasn't overthinking it.
It's so much more of a personal battle as well, even proximity, because you could be a great marathon runner and you run in a pack a little bit, but probably a mile 16 to mile 22, you slowly drift off. Whereas 1500, I mean, you are just stepping all over each other. You can get boxed in. You can smell everyone. You can hear everyone. You can. The intensity of it is so different.
Yeah, and the mind games as well. Like depending on who you're competing against and who's perceived to be potentially the favorite in that race. Like I ran in races where I was the favorite and people were looking at me, and people treat you differently. Like I could run at the back, and then or if I was right at the front, I could feel people queuing up behind me, but not going past me. So there's people on my shoulder who are like, well, he's the guy we're following, so we're going to wait to see what he does, which means that I could have slowed right down, sped right up, and they'd still have just stayed behind me. It's a very strange feeling. And then I've seen that in races where I wasn't. Like I've seen people treat other people with that kind of reverence and respect. And then similarly, like I've watched some of the best Kenyan athletes when I was racing, they'd get boxed in and they'd have the kind of confidence to literally, they would drop their hand to the side and just point, and then they would just move out. So they point and move. And there's a split second where you see that the natural reaction is to let someone out, because without even thinking, and then you're like, oh, why did I let them out? But then people do it. And I did try that a couple of times domestically. Like I'd get boxed in, you point and move. And because people are watching you, they let you out. And then you know that inside they're going, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah.
So yeah, the tactics is. I was speaking to Mike East recently, Commonwealth Games winner in 2002, 1500 meters, Olympic finalist 2004, and he was saying he'd always described it as like playing chess at 100 miles an hour or something like that. I can't remember his exact quote, but that's the difference, right? It's less of a war of attrition in the 1500 meters, although now the way that Inga Britson and those guys run, it is a bit more of a war of attrition because they set their stall out a little bit earlier and it's a bit of a more solid pace, which ironically would have suited me better. But it wasn't when I ran. There was a lot of go slow and then fast, and you don't see those surges on TV, but the surges are what kill you.
Yeah. Well, would you? Because you got a couple of boys now and a daughter. Would you want them to have a career as an potential Olympian 1500 meter runner?
I genuinely don't know. I think it depends on their. I'm definitely not going to push them into it because I fell into it, but I was quite good at running, and then but wasn't changing my life around it. I went to university based on academia, not on sport, and then happened to meet my coach in my first year at university, who was nothing to do with the university, a separate like warm weather training trip. So I was still serious enough to go warm weather training, but never imagined running at the Olympics. And then when I got a little bit more serious towards the end of my university career, that was the first flicker of like, oh, maybe you could make it. So now my motivation for my children, for me, is I want them to believe that I could once have gone to the Olympics. So that's my motivation to keep running, is like they're not in disbelief that my they're totally out of shape dad could possibly have gone to the Olympics. And in terms of them, like elite sport, you're seeing a lot of welfare stories in across the board in gymnastics and track and field. In terms of, I'm thinking of like Mary Kane in athletics, and like the stories that she said, like that doesn't surprise me at all. Like there is a very fine line between having people surrounding you who are so good at motivating you to be the best that you possibly could be, but that also means that they know how to push your buttons negatively and to manipulate you potentially, or to treat you in a way which isn't going to be good for your mental or physical health. And certainly from my daughter, like there's obviously a kind of body image, weight based concern. Like, to a point, the lighter you are, the faster you'll run. But obviously, that's, if you don't do it in the right way, that's like, it's not sustainable from a health perspective. And we're a lot more aware of like red S and people having an energy deficit and not training properly. But I would worry about that side of it. I think the kind of mental health welfare side of things. But if they love it, and that's what I had to remind myself at various points, and a couple of times I had to reset in my career. Like, it should be fun. Like, I used to love this. I used to do it just because I was good at it, and then it became a job because I was good at it.
Yeah.
And if I could remind myself of that, then I could get back to it.
And I think we're still finding the balance to a certain extent, where at the moment everything is focusing on mental health and well-being, and we might discover that actually you need to sacrifice mental health to really get to the top if you're competing against countries where they don't care about mental health. And put 200 million Russians through a system and 1.3 billion Chinese people through a system, someone's going to get through it, even if 90% of them are broken. And I guess that's the challenge, is how do you weigh up what the ideals of a culture are against whatever needs to be done to perform. It might not be the same thing.
And I think that's fascinating. I don't know the answer, but I do think that what's interesting now is you're seeing, Britain succeeding across the sporting world. But that's not how, I don't know how old you are, actually, not how I grew up. Like, I grew up with that being a kind of an anomaly. And interesting, that made those people more famous, right? I think because the people that were successful in the 90s, Linford Christie, Roger Black, Kelly Holmes,
Steve Redgrave,
Steve Backley, all of those people. But then they were exception to the norm from a British perspective. So that's why they became so famous. And then if you think about who's famous from 2012, like, we had some staggering number of medalists in 2012, and it was almost too good, right? Like, I spoke to people afterwards, and they were like, their immediate reaction to me, "Oh, you ran in 2012. Well, what medal did you get?" I got asked that quite a lot. I was like, well, I didn't get a medal. Not everyone got a medal, but there's this perception that everyone had been successful because we'd absolutely smashed it as a country. But then that means you've got people now like Josh Kerr last year at the Olympics getting a bronze in the 1500 meters, and he's not a household name. But if someone had won an Olympic bronze in the 1500 meters in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they would have been a household name for sure.
Especially to be fair to Josh Kerr, like, he's a charismatic guy. He's great on camera. He doesn't pull his punches. When he came out saying he was coming here to win, he's great for media. So you're right.
Yeah, and I would admit, like, I was boring. I was a product of that, like, well, I probably am still boring, but I was a product of that like era of, like, you just, the Tiger Woods style golf conferences where you just don't really get much meaning. It's the same, like, because people are worried. I was worried about saying the wrong thing, so maybe this is the wrong podcast for me if I'm worried about saying the wrong things.
But that's got no worries. Yeah. But I think as well, there's an evolution, because even the last few episodes we've been putting out, or we've just recorded, where we've been looking at the rise of the running teams, the sub brands of brands that are now, your Tin Man Elite and the likes that we've spoken to on Athletics Club. Personality now is suddenly, we're feeling that the move is athletes were losing their funding to influencers, and now the brands have come up with a format that actually allow athletes to be influencers. So you just shove a cameraman in there, you put in 10 people from different countries, suddenly you've got your narrative. And so I think we're going to see more and more athletes who are actually, their personality is being developed from an early age. It's being encouraged. It's being edited. It's being directed.
Yeah, well, I would say my group and I, like, we had so much fun, and I'm off, like, away from the spotlight, I suppose. We were like, a group of guys down at the pub, or guys and girls down at the pub. But then it was like, for me anyway, you then put a camera in my face and I'm super bland because you don't want to offend somebody. But now I think you're right that you have to have a personal, you have to be able to, like what I've just said, right? You could, performances were enough in the 80s, 90s, whatever, because you stood out. But now that there's a lot of people with cool stories and there's a lot of people being successful, in order to kind of cut through that, then I think, you have to tell a good story and be interesting. And I think it's helped now. There's more, certainly before I was running, and then in throughout my career, there were a lot of runners from the same countries that didn't necessarily speak English, and therefore in interviews or in the press, there's not, you can't, it's harder to tell those stories, right? To have a rivalry it's less relatable. And also, you were cycling through 20 amazing guys in the Diamond Leagues or Golden Leagues as they were then, where the 1500 meters in Rome would have one set of 12 guys in, and then the next 1500 meter race in Berlin or whatever will be a totally different set of people. And so how do you develop rivalries and stories when they're constantly changing? But I think that this is total anecdotal guesswork from me, but with runners from Kenya and Ethiopia, for example, moving onto into the marathon and the roads earlier because the money's better, that has meant that there's less changeover and turnover in the kind of Diamond League lineups, and you're getting more high profile European and American runners, which is where the sports marketing budgets come from, that then are getting developed as stories and so on. The Ingebrigtsens are a great example of that, and I think they would have come out on top regardless of who else was racing against them. But the fact that they're there, or I say, that there is someone there consistently winning, that develops a story that people are like tuning in to see, and then can anyone beat that person? And then it develops a rivalry. So like, will ultimately Jake Whiteman and Ingebrigtsen, will they have like this rivalry ongoing? That would be a really cool thing to see. And it's not about them being non-Africans, but I do think that what gets showcased is where the budgets are. The budgets are in kind of North America and in Europe, and they can speak English.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is about them not being African. We're honest, and people relate to people who are similar to them, and actually but then again, to say it's not the fact they are African. If we had someone from South Africa who was, or even someone from Kenya who was as fluent as us and came out with great stories and lived a similar lifestyle to us, but
or it's the rivalries, right? Like
mm,
I don't really remember seeing interviews with Gebre Selassie and Turgat, and then El Garouge example. I don't remember like caring about the fact they could speak English, but the fact that they were like going toe to toe over this epic 10,000 meter race, and then literally diving over the line together, and then showing up at the World Cross Country or whatever it was. Then I bought into that, and so it needs kind of both or one or the other. Like the rivalry, the kind of the language, the story needs some combination of those for people to like buy into it and want to like invest in watching, track and field.
Yeah, and just that continuity as well. When you've got that sense that someone is a true living legend, and you're privileged to watch them race every time, that is something that even without a rivalry of someone, you eclipse the sport. You have your Jordan, you have your Tiger Woods. You're so convinced that you're really privileged to watch every time they put on spikes.
And we've just been waiting to fill that void behind Bolt, haven't we? I think that's I know there are now some proper superstars, but like I was at meets with Bolt where people were like literally climbing up pylons to watch him and stuff. Like you said, people felt like if he came to their country, like being in the middle of nowhere, racing in Strava, and like, people peering through the fence. That's the magic of that kind of celebrity.
I don't think I've ever seen him run. Damn it! I missed it. Well, let's move on to the running channel then, because then, given that you've said that you didn't really like necessarily being in front of camera and you felt yourself almost stifled by it because you didn't want to say the wrong thing, how did you then make the leap into, well, let's put my whole business as being in front of camera?
Well, I was reluctant on camera Anna might disagree. She might say that I thrust myself upon. No, so like the running channel was born out of like the questions that I got asked during my career and then I'm retiring, and also the fact that I felt there was an opportunity to make videos about running and answer lots of people's questions, and also just provide. You mentioned Top Gear, but provide entertainment about running to allow people to kind of share that passion with other runners, but also with people who might loosely be interested in running and might not want to watch a how-to video about how to run a marathon, but they might want to watch people like race across a city or whatever it might be. And then Anna was doing, and we got Anna involved, and she did a brilliant job. Was launched the channel, was on within all the videos with Kate and Rick, and then we were experimenting with the idea of a series, but we didn't have the capacity to like, we had Anna and a cameraman, and he was doing the editing and shooting, and I was doing everything else. So I was like, well, okay, let me like pilot a series myself, and then Anna, you tell me what you think. And so I just took a GoPro and did a little vlog of me going to a park run, and then setting myself a challenge of trying to run. I think the challenge became like trying to run sub 15-minute 5K in 10 weeks. Turned out to be massively ambitious, and I got injured. But after the first one, we sent that kind of pilot to a few people outside of the channel, and they were like, "This is good, but Andy could be better." And I am better now. I'm still not the most polished presenter, but then that's part of the point of it. Like, we should be like, it should feel like you're getting a glimpse into someone's real life, and it's not always scripted and rehearsed. So I spent a day with a friend of the running channel, Rebecca Charlton, who's done some presenting for cycling and stuff. And she kind of stuck a camera in my face and just hammered me all day to like practice a few different lines from a few different scripts that the team had done previously. And it massively helped me to, like, by the end of it, there's quite a funny, there's a video that we took at the start of the day and then the video at the end of the day. By the end of the day, I'm like Gordon Ramsay. Like, it's like me times 10, so it's a bit too much. But that helped me just work out how to deliver. And I'm still quieter than someone like Anna, who's like a professional trained, broadcaster. But I've come out of myself a little bit. And then the other side of it ultimately is just the way I deal with that is not looking at too many comments or not like being obsessed with the comments.
Yeah. And I think that's true of anything that gets enough feedback is don't read it, because there's
Yeah.
always people have got weird views, but also some people are mean, and one person's voice isn't reflective of everything. But and
well, and that is actually like, it's like the bad races, right? You could read 100 comments and 99 of them are amazing, and one is bad, and then that's the thing that you dwell on. So yeah, and just to finish on how did I shift from what I was not wanting to be on camera to then what I am now, like I try to be in the videos that are appropriate for me to be in. So if they require a level of expertise or experience that I have and that I can talk to, then I'll be in the videos. But broadly, the guys who do a fantastic job at being in the other videos, Anna, Sarah, Rick, some of the other guys that we've started to do more with the channel recently, they're normal people. They haven't been to the Olympics, but they all have their own aspirations, and each of those aspirations are very individual, just like anyone, I hope, watching the channel. And so that's the idea, is that they might be faster than you, slower than you, but they still have the same kind of, and I do too, right? But I still have the same struggles and the same internal conversations, but try and be on camera when it's relevant for me to be on camera.
And when the channel was started, because with YouTube and pretty much anything, it's not as if you're launching on BBC One. You're launching on zero, and it takes a very long time to partly find your style, but find your audience, build your audience. So how long did you give yourself, and what were the first targets that you're trying to aim for, that were going to give you the feedback that actually this is a goer?
Yeah, that is terrifying. You're doing something and putting it out into the ether with zero audience, and then you get the first view and you're like, oh wow, okay, that's cool, someone has watched that video. And then you might look at the analytics and realize they only watched 30 seconds. But I guess I would stand back and say, like, the credit in the very early days is the hard work that Anna and Tom, who's our videographer, put in, because they banked a bunch of content that they'd shot and edited. And then we picked an October published start date. This is the day we're going to go live. This is we're building up to this. And then we put it out there. And then we tried to get anyone that we knew to share it and to watch it. And then you do the same with the next one, and you try and get a little bit better. And we had a bank of stuff to go out with initially that very quickly ran out. And then you're into the kind of hamster wheel of constantly making content. And you're trying to answer questions that you think are search worthy. You're trying to think, well, would I share this? Would I find this useful? But yeah, very much in those early days, I was relatively hands off. I had another job still. And then once the running channel was about 6 months old, then I was much less kind of in the back seat and stepped in to kind of ultimately lead the company, but the company was still only 3 of us. And then to try and see what we could do, if I could give a bit of extra support, because it's you're doing everything for the first time, so you're learning about YouTube analytics and the algorithm, which is also constantly changing, and you're finding out feedback from the audience. And interestingly, sometimes you put it out there to the people. You say, what would you like to see a video about? And then you make that exact video, and it's terrible. The performance on YouTube is terrible. But that's I'm not saying that people don't know what they want, but sometimes what people ask for isn't always what performs well, and that's sometimes quite a difficult thing.
Or even it could, as you say, the algorithm could be the impact on the result of the video as opposed to the audience in some ways. If the title's wrong or it's not magnified in the right way, then maybe people just didn't find out about it. And who was?
And you've got to constantly expect.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying you have to, or we try to constantly experiment. Sometimes you get it right and something does amazingly well. Sometimes you get it wrong, and that could be titles, thumbnail, images, different styles of stuff, the way that the video opens, and how quickly you get into the action, the subject matter, like you say, and also you are beholden to things that are out of your control. Ultimately, you're competing with thousands of other YouTube videos that get uploaded in the same window of time, and what happens to spark people's interests.
And what did you find kind of were the things a little, if you were to have to relaunch again, what did you find were the things that actually you went, oh wow, this is working, or this makes more of an impact than you necessarily would have realized?
I think, interestingly, when we tried to do stuff in the early days that was a bit sillier, I'm thinking of one thing in particular. We did a race where London City runners were fantastic to us as a kind of community. They were relatively close to where we are. We knew people there, and we were like, oh, can you come down to the track and film with us? We're going to do this. And we did a bubble race. So we like got the Zorbs that your feet stick out the bottom. And we did like a knockout 400-meter race and stuff like that, and filmed it all. I was really proud of it. And like, it's a really funny idea, but like, it didn't do that well. And we just got loads of comments like that were kind of, what's happened here is the 5-year-old started writing running channel scripts, and like they were quite like,
Ouch.
you take it quite personally because it's your baby, and on the face of it, that sounds like a fairly innocuous comment. But if you get enough of them where they're saying this is like pure R bullshit, this is mindless, what are you guys doing? But that's because to that point, broadly, we'd set the channel up as like a how-to resource. We sort of one of the things is that we want to have a variety of content on the channel, and that is also the biggest battle, right? Like, some people will have found us for a shoe review, and some people will have found us for guidance to running your first marathon or something like that. And then if you do a video which is more challenge based, or is like we've done videos where we'll have like a physio react to bad running advice, and those all have their place on our channel, and I like would stand by that. But it does mean that some people are like, what's this? Is this what I signed up for? But you can kind of, that's the nature of YouTube, right? You can choose not to watch a video, and I'd hope that there's always something that's of interest. If you're loosely interested in running, I'd hope that almost all of our videos are interesting. But I definitely would say I know they're not for everybody.
And you're right. My impression of the early days was that it did seem to be targeting the obvious, how to train for uphill, like what shoes to choose, or things along those lines. At what point do you feel you deviated then into more of the exploratory and actually really, because I don't think that was really the running channel's voice back. The voice then isn't the voice now. The scripts would be massively different, and with the confidence, but the style as well.
Yeah, it's resource as much as anything else. Like the if you're one main presenter and one camera person, and then having supporting presenters and so on, like and that's in terms of like who was employed. I'm not saying that the presenters were more or less important, but like Anna was employed by the running channel, and so with one camera person and one lead presenter, in that context, like making how-to videos is straightforward. You can script them, you can go and shoot them in a park, but like choosing, we did a video where we ran a head-to-head with two presenters running the Monopoly board in London. That's a really involved video shoot, which is no way we could have done in the early days, because we were still proving the concept. And then so to say, like, let's hire in like 3 extra film crew and another presenter, and spend an entire day or 5 hours or whatever it was it took us shooting around London, like it's just not viable when you haven't proved the concept. So but we definitely always felt that the running channel was more, I suppose, more of a companion than it was just one type of content. So we certainly, the mission from very early on, which it's hard to express that through video without sitting people down who don't care about your like marketing mission or your mission as a business, but it was to say, like, my experiences running have been best where I felt part of a community, whether that's been the national British, like the athletics team, whether it's been part of like a relay as a kid, like that's probably where I've been the happiest, or 9 a.m. and then 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning pre and post park run, where there's this kind of like buzz of excitement pre, and then afterwards this is an amazing sense of like shared accomplishment, shared experience, and so like bottling that is the best way I could describe as to what we've been trying to do at the running channel, and that means doing loads of different stuff. So trying to inform people through like helping them, I hope, how to do stuff, giving them a kind of trusted voice that like is well researched, and doing our best to not patronize, but also to explain stuff that people might feel like they should know but don't know. But then also to do stuff where we'll challenge ourselves in serious challenges, like Sarah right now is trying to break 45 minutes for 10K in a series, but also do relay challenges. We did one earlier or last year where a group of like, I think it was 14 or 15 people tried to beat me in a relay. So they passed the baton from each other over 5K. So they each ran 200, 300, 400 meters, and I ran the whole way. And that the idea of that was to try and contextualize the pace that fast runners go at, to show that like actually 15 people running flat out for 400 meters, 12 and a half, whatever adds up to 5K, found it difficult to run, 16 minutes for 5K. So yeah, that's where the kind of the vision for the lots of different types of content comes from, because we want to keep like doing exciting stuff and making people give us ideas as well. Like people will write in and say, to the kind of, I suppose, less sexy stuff, they'll say, please could you give us some insight into VO2 max? But they might also say like, oh, you guys should take on this epic race in the mountains, or you guys should see if you can like do this adventure where, like, one of the first challenges we did was Rick and Anna going head to head to see who could run the furthest as the crow flies from the steps of St. Paul's.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
In 1 hour, and then that spawned like a series of Rick versus Anna, and like that's what I hope is kind of fun and interesting.
And do you think the Anna being Anna and Anna's speed, or Rick being Rick and their speed, do you think it would have worked as well if they were slower or they were faster? Like, do you think there's something about their ability relating to the audience that is needed?
I mean, it's what we set out to do, like very clearly with the right people in that they were like able to, people could follow their journey and feel like they weren't so fast that they couldn't relate to them. And ultimately that's, I think, what I would have been if it was me fronting the channel. I think if I ever speak to groups of people and I talk about the Olympics, you can see almost they're like, there's a sense of appreciation that must have been hard, but there's not like this excitement or understanding. But as soon as you talk about parkrun, if I talk about parkrun, then people are like, even though it's the same distance, I could talk about 5K, right? But as soon as you talk about parkrun specifically, then it's like a light gets turned on where people think, I've experienced the same thing as this person. And so yeah, with Rick and Anna, like they would both say neither of them are the fastest runner, but like Anna has real attributes that I don't have. Like she is so tough, and can, like, I would struggle to run any form of ultra because of the time that you've got to put your body through that level of suffering, and I would genuinely be concerned about finishing. Whereas Anna's, that's her mindset. She can finish anything she puts her mind to broadly, but whereas she might not enjoy chasing a time. So yeah, that's that's what I hope. I don't know how that comes across to you, but that's very much the desire, is to have as much diversity as we can on the channel, where people relate to people for different reasons, and that could be ability, it could also be gender, and any other kind of things that you might consider to make up that kind of diversity of like the amazing running community that all look, sound different, come from different backgrounds, run in different ways, have come to running from different routes.
And did that growth come in the way you expected, the demographics? Were there some countries, some regions, some ages, some things that surprised you?
I really expected us to just be UK. Like, maybe that's like, I just expected our audience to be from the UK. We're British. We are based in London and hail from all over the UK. And so I sort of assumed that's who we would reach. The benefit of YouTube, though, is that it is global, and that you're not limited to just reaching the people you think you might reach. And so actually our audience is pretty similarly sized in the US as it is in the UK. And then obviously we don't have non-English speakers on the channel. So it's predominantly English language nations, but they are from all over the world, and it's quite a big, all-encompassing demographic but it's led by the English language nations. So the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Netherlands and Germany, because they speak arguably better English there than we do here. And it turns out, I think that like I joke about it, or I've thought about it in a joking way, like kind of the Love Actually scene where like the British accent is well received in the US. That like it seems to translate. Like people seem to. I would say that we're self-deprecating and have a British sense of humor and don't take ourselves too seriously, and do show that running's hard and that it's not like an Instagram filter of all of the best bits. It's like, actually, Anna's had some tough times, and she said on the channel. Similarly, Rick's, had surgery, and we've not kind of tried to gloss over that stuff. And that seems to be well received, regardless of where people are in the world.
And do you get a sense that different countries like different content?
No, I haven't picked up that there's like a massive shift where, in the US they want us to do challenges, and the UK it's like stick to how to. It's no, it's like that seems fairly universal appeal to different sections of the running audience in kind of different parts of the world for different things. And we have a pretty broad age demographic too. So like it's nice to have such a broad appeal. Like we're trying to appeal to kind of anyone who runs, not necessarily anyone who would self-define as a runner, but anyone who's out there running. That's the people we'd love to come and find something for themselves on the channel.
And how do the finances of the channel work? Without revealing too much, because just think as someone who watches YouTube, unless you're involved in it, I mean, I'm completely clueless as how many thousands of subscribers does it take to be seen as kind of a channel that's sponsorship worthy? Like, at what point does it, given you've mentioned, for example, the Monopoly board, where you've got 2 runners, 2 film crew all day long. I mean, just you're talking about 6 days worth of work for one person spread amongst them, and that obviously is quite a lot of money. Like, how does all the funding work for it, and if you know any kind of approximate figures, because I think it's fascinating in general.
Yeah, so the that's the question everyone wants to know. Like, if I meet someone for the first time and they're like this, I'm like, sort of almost, it's quite difficult to explain what we do if you're not familiar with it. And they're like, first they just dive straight in. People have no like concerns with saying, but how do you pay it? Like, how do you make money? And my parents being amongst them. And the I guess you break it down like if you're an individual YouTuber, which we're not, we're a channel and I have employees, then you can make pretty good money from the ads that get served on YouTube, so the AdSense auction. But that's not enough to sustain a business. So like there's fairly, public data out there about like what RPM, so the revenue per 1,000 views that you might achieve on the channel. And so our revenue from ads, as much as I think actually there's a perception in the comments sometimes that like YouTube distribute the ads. That's not, we don't select what ads get shown and we don't place the ads. There's a perception that is like more than enough for us and that we've got millions of views, which we do have millions of views on the channel every month. But that would sustain our business, and it doesn't. So the business is from brand partners, and so ultimately we try and strike that balance where we try to only ever make videos that we would have made anyway, and then the brands are adding to that, and they're not intrusive and they're not salesy. It's very much like it's a sponsored video, so it's not a video with us saying buy a Garmin watch because it's great. It's us illustrating a feature of GPS watches in general sponsored by Garmin, or it's us taking on a challenge using the metrics from a Garmin to illustrate that challenge. Like Manny and I went head to head over 10K. We were wearing the HRM Pro, which is a Garmin product that has advanced running analytics as part of its, or dynamics as part of its kind of selling point. And so after, or either live on your watch or afterwards, you can see like left-right balance and length of time your feet spent on the ground, stride length, all of this advanced stuff. So then we could talk people through our 10K attempt. But ultimately, the video is about running a 10K as fast as you can, and about avoiding injury, and about how your stride length and cadence changes as you get fatigued. And Manny's a physio, so he's qualified to talk about that with me. So that's the working with brand partners on projects like that is ultimately what pays the bills.
Is there a number that you think the bills would be paid by if you've reached a certain number of subscribers? That would probably then mean you get a certain number of views, or do you think that will always be the model?
That's a good question. So like the right now the AdSense revenue is like it's not even kind of close to sustaining the business. So it's not like it's not a huge proportion of income. So it would have to be a lot more than it is now. And ultimately, I think you asked the question at the beginning, which is like, and what's the threshold, do you think, for how big the channel has to be to have an appeal to work with brands? I don't think there's an answer to that. Ultimately, we started we waited for ages because we didn't think we had something to offer. And then when we got to the point where we had several, we're approaching 100,000 subscribers, that's when we were sort of thinking about this being meaningful. And then you have the conversations, and you're very you're new in the market, and people don't know how they could work with you. And so you have to work really hard on two sides of it, which is one, to not piss off the audience, our community, the people that I hope like what we do and feel like we're providing a good service for free for them. And I hope they don't really see it as a service. They see it as something that's a small part of their life that they enjoy watching. But not piss them off, by bringing in, you were quite rightly, when we first announced Garmin as a partner, for example, people were asking us, well, how is this going to improve my experience on the running channel? How do you manage to stay objective? All of those things. And the simple answer is that, like you said, making more ambitious and more exciting videos takes resource. And so ultimately, we need the investment of brand partners to be able to make cooler stuff, or what we hope is cooler stuff, and to improve the content overall of the how-tos. Like if you look at a how-to video that we make now versus what we made at the beginning, we've learned a lot. We'd hopefully do it in a more meaningful way, where it's not, we can have graphics on screen and try to tell a story in a more compelling way with more exciting shots and better research and things like that. Maybe better research is unfair, because we did quite a lot of research back in the day, but I guess you know what I mean. There's more investments in every facet of what we're trying to make, and still trying to balance that where we do it in a way that's interesting.
Do you think you've made some steps? Do you think you've made any steps or any mistakes or any videos where you did get that jarring with the audience?
Well, interesting. There are, not massive mistakes where I think, we shouldn't have done that. We've sold out in some way. I'm pretty proud that we haven't done anything like that. We've only worked with products that we've tested and brands that we know and trust and things like that. And we've never directly told people necessarily that you need to, in YouTube content, you need to go and buy something in order to run. The brilliance of running is that you can do it fairly cheaply, but then once you get passionate about it, you might want to invest in certain things. Have we done anything? Some people will take offense if we ultimately we might do a video about heart rate, how to set your heart rate zones, and we'll use Garmin products in the B-roll in the video to demonstrate how that's relevant to you, what it means, to visually be able to see on a watch what it is you'd be looking at when you're running. But then we would get comments where people are like, this is just an advert for Garmin, and I understand that, but we do try to balance that with the fact that all of the advice in the video is generically relevant regardless of what watch you might have, and we're doing a job for the people that are supporting us and that are paying the bills by I guess showcasing their product in terms of product placement. But that is my biggest concern is staying credible and making sure we do things in a way where we're delivering value for the people that are paying us, but we're not doing it in a way where people feel offended by it.
And because I guess the other challenge as well is because product placement works when, as you say, you've got a good concept that you can use the product for. The challenge will be, what if most of your money is coming from Garmin and not from trainers, and so everything has to be something based on a watch. So suddenly all your challenges are skewed to your idea. I guess the blank page of a piece of paper to come up with all these concepts suddenly has a big Garmin circle around it, which could be moved a little bit around. But is that a worry that you're forced into creating content that has to meet certain criteria? Or
No, we're pretty clear when we enter into the kind of conversations with brands, and I've used Garmin as an example because they were kind of first in the door and been there right from the beginning with us. But they're also like we're free to review other watches, and when we review like a Garmin product, we're also doing that editorially and trying to state the facts, really. Like this is what the features the watch has. It's comparable to this watch from Coros or this watch from Polar. And like, people have to, I suppose, take our word for the fact that we're being objective there. But we're working with, the 45-minute 10K series I mentioned is with Puma. We've done some series. Anna did a massive series heading into Berlin Marathon last year with Adidas. And again, those series are like ones we want to do anyway, and the brand are supporting them. So Anna was training for a marathon. Sarah ran an Amsterdam Marathon with Mizuno last year. And I don't want to be seen to be jumping between brands. I want to give each brand a kind of a clear section or segment of content where, for like a series or a period of time, like where it feels like a natural fit. And like I said, that if you take the brand out of the video, that video is still like interesting and exciting. And actually, like in a lot of the videos with brands, we're giving away products as a competition. So there is something additive in it anyway. Plus the fact that if you're running from a marathon or training for 10K, you are wearing running kit. So I mean, that's and similarly, we're wearing stuff that we've tested and that we're comfortable that like we think are good products.
And in terms of, we talked before we started recording about some of the areas I wanted to cover today. The one that Jody and I were talking about, we'd watched the Garmin episode where, I believe it's Garmin, where you and Sarah, I think, both had to navigate a certain route or something, and that's when I think we hadn't watched the running channel for a bit. We're like, wow, this is really Top Gear now, and really enjoyed the episode. And we then started to conjecture that how hard it would be to keep on creating really good content, because magazines like Runner's World have the almost joy that in 3 years' time they can slightly rework the same article, and the reader's probably changed a lot, or it's just as fresh. Whereas because on YouTube it is truly eternal, and those videos will carry on raking up views, and actually the more views a video have, the more likely you are to see it. So to a certain extent, some of your older videos are going to be seen first by a new audience. So like, how does that, are you nervous about that, having to create genuinely new content, or having to almost not, like Top Gear got trapped in its own stereotype to a certain extent, where you knew what was going to happen before the episode started? Like, is that a fear of yours?
I'm not. I guess it's a consideration. Like it's definitely, and it keeps us on our toes because I'm constantly challenging the team, and I'm trying to think of new ideas all of the time. There's going to be some stuff that obviously you can do every year, like what are the best running shoes and testing them and things like that. We'll definitely we will revisit old videos from time to time, because ultimately, yes, people via search might have found the old video, but algorithmically, when we publish new videos, as we grow, it gets pushed to more and more new people. And so there's value in continuing to create stuff that is genuinely good advice. And when I say we'll revisit old videos, I'd hope that we're able to add to them in some way, whether that's bringing in a new expert to talk about it. The science of training does change all the time, or whether we just tackle it in a different way, where instead of doing a sit down how-to video about a particular event, we'll go and do it as a vlog whilst running the event, or like add extra layers of interest to it. But also that I don't feel like we've even touched the kind of limits of what's possible and what we could cover. Like we've done very little on nutrition, for example, on like eating and food and drink and things like that. And then the challenges will never be the majority of what we do, but there'll definitely still be a place for those. So like I said, I think it's trying to find a balance, and there's a healthy concern about trying to keep the content new and fresh. And like if you weren't a little bit nervous like that, I don't think it would challenge you to like make good stuff. And actually the community are brilliant at that. Like some of the comments we get are like so original, and the ideas and stuff are really inspiring. And there's also a wealth of, thankfully for us, I suppose, in a way, we had to make do without running events for 2 years while we were growing. And now running events are back. That's a massive, and I hope that we can play some small part in, like, from my understanding, a lot of the numbers are down outside of the big bucket list events. Numbers haven't returned to parkrun. Numbers of people haven't returned to all of the smaller mass participation events around the country, around the world. And like, if we can, like, that's how we all enjoy, not all of us, but a lot of people at the running channel enjoy seeing and meeting the running community and having experiences of running through like that sense of achievement of an event. So like if we can play a small part in trying to help people find new races, or documenting what races are like for new people who have never run a 10k or a marathon or a half marathon, then that's like quite a big opportunity for us, I think. So we're, if anyone's listening and's got some cool ideas of what we should do, or things, I'm sure people will be thinking about stuff that we could do a lot better than we do. Then like we're kind of, I'd like to think we're always open and trying to respond to what people would like, and ultimately maybe what people don't like, and stop doing the stuff they don't like.
And what would do you get a sense of where you think the natural limit is of numbers of subscribers, kind of UK worldwide? Because there obviously is a maximum. Like how big do you think it can go, and also how much do you think the voice of the channel will almost need to change, because those first few people obviously are not necessarily representative of the bigger audience, and the bigger you go, the different voices, but also expertise, needs, demands all completely change.
This is definitely the most well thought out questions I've ever been asked. So it's good to be challenged on this stuff.
There's been no thought on it. It literally no nothing written down. It's just classic, just build and build. Anyway.
We should get you in. We should get you in as a consultant to kind of challenge us on all this stuff. Numbers wise, I do think it's millions. It's like we're at 500, close to 550,000 now subscribers on YouTube,
which is
incredible. I think that's. Thank you. Yeah, it's really, like, as much as we're talking about it in quite a, what's the business and how we think it, like, it's just something that I'm really proud of. These people that are interested in what we're doing and have been amazingly supportive. Like the running community outside the running channel, the running community is incredibly supportive. I'm sure you've seen that through this podcast and through your own experiences in the running show and all that sort of stuff. So the numbers, I think, are there for it to be millions. We haven't, there are internal targets we're working to, but like you have to take what comes with, like, how people receive the content and ultimately how that impacts growth. So some of it's out of your control, but we're just trying to make stuff that's fun and improve the production quality and give people a little bit more sense of the personality of the people that are involved, and not make it too kind of, corporate. Should still be fun, like a little bit like my running career. Like, this is my job now, but it should still be fun. Like, it should feel like you're watching people having fun, and that the people on camera that you see, that like the moment the camera's turned off, you get the sense that there's no different, right? Like they're the same. That's the game, the kind of the aim. And then you're right that ultimately there's going to be, as we grow, there's going to be people that came for a very specific thing to the running channel, and that specific thing might not be every video, or it won't be every video on the running channel, because, like I said, we're trying to have variety. So I would just hope that we get the balance right, ultimately, of trying to not piss off the people who are like our early adopters and our biggest fans from the beginning, who are then I'd hope invested in the personalities, and like they feel like we're their mates, like, and that they're interested in what we're doing from a personality perspective, and that even if the content itself takes a slightly different direction, that's okay with them, and that they see why, because like we have to find new stuff to make, and we have to appeal to the right people, and we're having those conversations all of the time, like how do we stay relevant, how do we talk to the right people, but also how do we appeal to new people. That's the goal of growing any business, I guess.
And with the presenters themselves, because something that is incredibly hard to foresee, to manage, is you need presenters who can run. And as we all know, it's like having you've essentially got 3 athletes, and you need them to be performing all the time, and that isn't always possible. And particularly as the easiest story is the longest race, the hardest race, the craziest this, that the physical extremities are the ones that are really easy to just attract attention with, but that obviously can conflict with the needs of individuals. So like how is that something you've had to really consider, quite closely in thinking about how build out your content, and do you think that's something that's going to be always a massive challenge, and that will be able to find the right balance for?
It's definitely a challenge. Like the reality of running is it's hard, and that people get hurt, and or the and currently, like, I'd encourage people to bring me their challenges they want to take on, rather than me forcing people to like run some crazy ultra at like 10 days notice. But then that happens too. Like sometimes we'll get the opportunity which seems too good to turn down, and then I'll ask someone, hey, like we've got this race place, do you fancy doing it and documenting it for us? And that's like difficult, but I suppose the most important thing is that we won't try and kind of shy away from the fact that stuff is hard. And so like it's okay that, like, so Rick had really serious knee surgery. It was nothing to do with running, actually. It's from childhood, like degradation of cartilage, which is pretty bad. And so he's still like involved in the channel when he can be, but obviously can't run at all. We've told his story and like not shied away from the fact that it wasn't all kind of roses, and actually it was quite emotional. Similarly, Anna picked up lots of injuries, and she's also been open about how she struggled with other elements of training last year for the Berlin Marathon, and how hard lockdown was for her mentally, from having been in a certain like level of fitness and motivation, to then, I found lockdown incredibly lonely and difficult, and struggled to be motivated, even though I had technically more time to go out running. I ran less probably. So yeah, I think the answer is yes, it's a balance, and obviously I've got to look after people and try and make sure that they have support. Like thankfully, I know a lot of people in like, I suppose, sports medicine, or more generally, that we can get good advice from, and try to look after people, and at the same time try and protect people from themselves. Like, you'll know, the more running you do, the more like obsessed you can become with doing more running, and so like making sure that then when I'm asking people to run for a living, that's then the same as I had. It's just a different context. So I'm very aware of that pressure to perform, and feeling like it's your job, so you have to do certain things,
and keeping the joy in it as well. If that it comes across, if someone's not, if in some ways it's good if people are talking about how hard something is, or how they're not loving it, but if someone's genuinely not, in any context, happy in front of camera, that comes through. And I guess that's challenging it. And then the just for, because I know some listeners will be massively interested in this, any tips for what are the top tips for making good YouTube videos, would you say?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're still battling with that every day. And sometimes I think we've made the best video we've ever made, and then the platform or the algorithm is like, denied. But so I'd say, this is hopefully not patronizing or obvious. Like the thumbnail and the title are more important than anything else. So the like if they're not right, then no one will watch it. And there's a balance to be struck, which I think actually you said, did I make any mistakes or whatever? I think sometimes you have to toe the line of clickbait. Like that's the reality. But we hopefully stay the right side of it, and actually we're quite a long way from it most of the time. It's fairly like, this is what the video is. But then like you have to make people click. You have to give them a sense of intrigue, and so the title has been right. Interestingly, I think brands often get this wrong. Like they'll make a YouTube video and then they have a massive YouTube following because they're a big brand, but then they call the video like something cool and abstract. But then if you don't know what the video is, like, why would you click on it? I mean, people do click on it because it's from the big brand and they want to see what their latest campaign is. But if you go too far that way, then there's a reason that the biggest YouTubers in the world have like incredibly succinct titles that tell you what you're going to get, and then they give you a thumbnail that an image that kind of you think, I want to click on that, I want to see what that's all about. So yeah, thumbnail and title. Then like this is something I'd say that has changed massively in our most recent videos. Getting to the point, like certainly in our early days, we felt like we had to introduce who we were. And so it's like, hey, welcome to the running channel. Today we're going to be talking to you about this. And then by the time you've got through all of that, you're like, might be a minute in and you haven't actually given anyone any new information. So I think that's not always the case. Like a lot of vloggers are very successful just by putting out their day, and they don't really get to the point because that's you've not come to answer a question, right? You've come to see what their day is like. But if someone's clicked on a video that's asked a question like, how do I do something, then you need to give them some hint of that answer in the first little bit. So definitely the videos we've done in the last 3 to 6 months are quite different in how they open compared to like early running channel for sure. And then like we do our best to reply to all the comments or interact with the comments where we can, and to give a genuine reply if it's relevant. Someone asks a question, we'll try to answer it. So I think that's quite important. I don't know how important. And then it's the stuff that people might find annoying on YouTube, but everyone I've spoken to at YouTube says likes, comments, and shares are the thing that benchmarks in the YouTube algorithm how good your video is. So if anyone is listening and is a running channel fan, hitting like on our videos makes a massive difference. And dropping a comment, even if it's just an emoji or like a thumbs up or something like that, like will make a difference to us as a business. Like it's like a free way of supporting creators out there. So not just us, there's amazing other guys out, like Ben is doing a brilliant job. Ben Parks, this messy happy. Like there's all of these guys that like make really cool stuff that's really different. Like it's about their individual experience, or it's about racing at an elite level. These are all about totally different things. And actually, like if you like them and people are giving you stuff for free, then hitting like or dropping a comment actually has a bigger impact than you probably could imagine, because that's what the algorithm goes, oh cool, people are interacting with this, we'll show it to more people, which means that's how a video gets distributed a bit more widely.
Interesting. And actually you kind of instinctively know all these things, but people don't put them into practice, do they, half the time?
Yeah, and that's we're probably guilty of that too. But when you hear someone say like smash the like button, or like when we get to 2,000 likes we're going to give away a pair of shoes, like there's I mean, on one hand you could think of it as cynical because that's how we'll get more views, but then more views help support the creators that you like. So and I sort of hate myself for talking about us as a creator, but that's the language that people use in YouTube. But we make videos, like we make videos to try and help people. And I'm really excited when we get amazing emails from all over the world from people saying, I followed Sarah's journey for this, and that's the reason that I've signed up for my first 10K. Or Anna is so tough. I can't believe she completed the world's toughest island race. I must have watched it 5 times. After doing that, I've gone from like 250 pounds to, whatever their weight loss story might be. And there's so many amazing things that we do get. That's actually a really nice reminder that, we're doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. And nice easy one to finish off. I'm sure you've been asked 100 times. What are the videos that you haven't made that you want to make, or that you could never make just because they're too hard, too expensive, or just not quite right for the channel?
Oh, there's we've got some keen. So Tom, who's been involved right from the very beginning, is a very keen kind of climber, mountaineer. There's been lots of discussion about. I think there's an Everest marathon that runs to and from base camp, and things like that. There's obviously the incredibly expensive 7 marathons in 7 continents in 7 days, which only comes around every few years and costs like 50,000 euros to go and do it, and also potentially isn't the most. I haven't looked into it recently. I don't know how sustainable that is, like in terms of environmental impact, which is a consideration. Those are things that are like, taking on these really epic things. I think we hopefully will make stuff like that, like the Everest one and things like that. But the logistics of that, and obviously the risks of sending people up into the mountains, start to become a little bit more extreme. And then the video that everyone wants me to make is me running my first marathon. So that's the one that may never happen if I keep putting it off.
Mid-November. Well, if you're not doing Beaujolais Marathon, which I'd argue you can turn up untrained and just amble around with a few drinks in you, then Beer Lovers Marathon next year. I think it's in May or so, or April. It's incredibly fun.
Playing to my strengths. You're not playing to my strengths, because I'm not very good at running right now, and I'm definitely not very good at drinking. So
in some ways, it will just mean you remember less of the pain. So you could see that as a bonus in some respects.
I'll take your word for it.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Andy. Absolute joy and fascinating, as I thought it would be. And if there's anything we can do to help the channel in the future, then please let us know.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and keep up the good work. Like it's I quite enjoy your, I don't know, ramblings is the right word, but they keep me happy and entertained. And I think some of the stuff that we're trying to do, which is you've struck that chord that we've talked about. Like it feels like listening to your friends at the pub, having a slightly inane sometimes conversations, but that all the more entertaining and brilliant for it.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much again, Andy, and all the best with training for that marathon.
Thank you.
Fuck you, buddy.